Some motorcycles have more than one purpose. Some are the identity of a nation, the symbol of a freedom. Not because someone decided they should be, but because what they represent, what they carried, what they made possible, made it impossible to feel anything but awe. This is a 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL, the most sacred machine in American motorcycle history. The final year of Knucklehead production, the last breath of a legend. A machine that defined what America looked like from the seat of a motorcycle, and it stood here abandoned, hidden from every road it was built to travel, silenced by time, forgotten by the world, until today. At the edge of town, there's a junkyard that nobody visits anymore. Rusted gates, broken fences.
Look at that patina.
For years, forgotten machines slowly merging with the earth, disappearing one season at a time. The kind of place where time had stopped, where stories were left unfinished, where things were left behind by people who never came back. We walked slowly through the junkyard. Crushed cars, bent frames, engines that hadn't turned in decades. Everything here has a story that ended too soon. A story nobody finished. A story nobody came back for. And then, there, half buried in rust, hidden among scrap metal and overgrown weeds, pressed down under the weight of years, a silhouette that stopped us completely. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just looked. Because some things you recognize before you can explain why. That distinctive rounded tank, those Art Deco lines, flowing and confident even under all that rust. And most importantly, those rocker covers, standing there like a fist, powerful, unmistakable, distinctive rocker covers. Knucklehead. There is only one engine in the world that looks like that. For someone who knows, this sight is not just a motorcycle. This is the soul of America. This was a 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL, one of the last Knuckleheads ever produced. 1947, the final year. This engine would never be built again. Not one more, not ever. And one of them was lying right here, for decades, quietly, in a junkyard at the edge of town, waiting for someone who would understand it, someone who would see past the rust, past the silence, past all those forgotten years, and recognize what was still there. We understood. We took it, brushed the rust away with our hands. The frame was intact. The engine cases were solid. The crankshaft turned. Slowly, with resistance, but it turned. This machine hadn't died. It had just been abandoned. We made a call. We agreed on a price. And on that morning, one of the most iconic machines in American motorcycle history found someone to fight for it again, someone who wasn't going to walk away. Getting it out was not easy. It hadn't moved in decades. Every component felt locked in place, held down by time, rust, and the weight of forgotten years. The wheels had fused to the ground. The tires had cracked and crumbled into themselves. Every bolt, every connection, every surface frozen in place beneath years of neglect, seized by rust, held fast by time. A machine like this does not forgive carelessness. It asks for something in return: patience, attention, respect. We worked slowly, carefully, without rushing, taking our time with every section, every movement deliberate, every step considered, lifting each section by hand, making sure nothing cracked, nothing broke. We loaded it onto the flatbed, secured it with soft ties, wrapped the most fragile parts, because this was not just a motorcycle on a truck. This was 1947 on a truck. This was Milwaukee and Daytona and every open American highway, all sitting on the back of a flatbed, heading somewhere it could breathe again. And as the sun rose that morning, as the light began to fall across the junkyard, across everything that had been left behind, the 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL left the place where it had been abandoned. It was taking its first journey in a very long time. Not to an auction house, not to a showroom, not behind glass, to a workshop, to a pair of hands that understood exactly what it deserved, that understood exactly what it meant. But the real journey was only just beginning. When it arrived at the restoration workshop, we saw the damage clearly for the first time. Under proper light, without the shadows of the junkyard hiding what time had done. The fuel tank had corroded from the inside. Layer after layer of old fuel turned to varnish, then to solid. The carburetor was completely blocked, sealed shut by decades of neglect. The electrical system had nearly vanished entirely. The wiring crumbled between our fingers like old glass, connections that had long since given way. The chrome surfaces, almost nothing remained, worn down to memory. But the engine block was intact, the frame was solid, the crankcases were whole, and when we turned the crankshaft, it moved. Slowly, with effort, but it moved. That was enough. That was everything. Because this machine was not built to give up. It was built by people who did not know how to give up. The 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL was the boldest step in American motorcycle engineering. And you could feel that even standing in front of it in the workshop, even disassembled, even worn down by time. That presence was still there, undeniable. The story begins in 1936, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Harley-Davidson factory. Engineers who had spent years working with flathead engines introduced something new that day, something that nobody had seen before, something that changed everything. The first overhead valve V-twin, 61 cubic inches, not cast iron, but aluminum alloy cylinder heads. Overhead valves, modern, powerful, and those rocker covers, extraordinary fist-shaped, powerful-looking rocker covers. They called them Knucklehead, the knuckle engine, a name that stuck, a name that meant something. When it was introduced in 1936, it produced 40 horsepower. A 1917 Harley produced only 16. This was not just an improvement. This was a revolution. The Knucklehead pulled Harley out of the depths of the Great Depression. It gave the company its future back. For those who wanted more power, the 74 cubic inch FL model arrived in 1941. 1,200 cc's, 48 horsepower. It could cruise at 60 miles per hour for hours on end, without tiring, without trembling, with confidence, with authority. When the Second World War began, the Harley factory switched to military production. Knucklehead production stopped. Harleys were fighting on the front lines, but those were flathead models. The Knucklehead didn't go to war. It was waiting for something greater, something worth coming home to. When the war ended, civilian production resumed in 1946, and Americans, longing for the open road, rushed toward the Knucklehead. In 1947, more than 11,000 Knuckleheads were sold. It was Harley's best year since the Great Depression, the best year in over a decade. But it was also the last year. In 1948, the Panhead would arrive, and the Knucklehead would pass into history. The 1947 FL was the final link in that legend, the last one, the closing chapter. The 1947 Knucklehead FL was not just a motorcycle, it was a part of American culture. Soldiers returning from war were searching for freedom, searching for the open road, wanting to feel something after years of darkness, wanting to move, wanting to breathe, wanting to travel the length and breadth of the country without answering to anyone. And for that, there was only one machine made for the job. The Harley-Davidson Knucklehead. In 1947, Marlon Brando hadn't yet put on that leather jacket. The Wild One hadn't been filmed. The biker culture the world would come to know hadn't yet found its name, but the road was already there. Freedom was already on the motorcycle. The Knucklehead didn't give birth to that culture. The Knucklehead was that culture. Before anyone knew what to call it, before anyone wrote it down, before it became a movie, before it became a legend, it was already alive, right here on these roads, on this machine. And now it stood before us, after decades of silence, after decades of rust and neglect and forgetting, still here, still undeniable. Standing in front of this engine now, disassembled, worn down by decades, covered in the quiet of forgotten years, you could still feel what it once was. Not just see it, feel it. The presence of a machine that changed the course of American motorcycling. 1200cc, air-cooled, a 45-degree V-twin, overhead valves, 7-to-1 compression ratio, 48 horsepower, 4-speed transmission, hand shift, foot clutch, the most advanced technology of 1947. On paper, that might seem modest, but those numbers don't tell the story of this engine. In 1937, Joe Petralli set a land speed record of 136 miles per hour on a Knucklehead at Daytona Beach. 136 miles per hour in 1937, before the war, before the world changed, before anyone thought it was possible. This engine wasn't just powerful, this engine was brave. The Knucklehead was also the first motorcycle in Harley history to come with a speedometer as standard equipment, because it was fast enough to need one, because the engineers in Milwaukee knew exactly what they had built, and they wanted the rider to know it too, from the moment they sat down, before the engine was even started. Every Knucklehead FL with that great 74 cubic inch V-twin swallowed the American highways whole, a cruising speed of 60 miles per hour, for hours, without tiring, without complaining, just moving forward, the way America moved forward. This was not just an engine, this was a way of life. The frame went to sandblasting first. Years of rust, paint, and grime stripped back layer by layer. Work that required patience, work that required care, work that could not be rushed, not on a machine like this. What emerged underneath was clean, bare metal, bright and honest and true. The frame was perfect, not a single crack, not a single bend, built with the same precision, the same care, the same uncompromising standard as the day it left the factory in 1947. The engine was fully disassembled, every single component carefully inspected, cleaned, and measured, laid out on the bench, examined under light. Every surface checked, every internal dimension verified, every tolerance confirmed. New gaskets, new seals, new bearings, everything that time had worn away, replaced. Not substituted, not approximated, replaced correctly. The carburetor was completely rebuilt, jets cleaned, needles set, float adjusted. The fuel system restored from tank to engine. The wiring rerouted from scratch. Every cable, every connection, every fuse, all of it new, all of it clean. The bodywork was carefully refinished. Those iconic Art Deco lines restored to their original beauty. The flowing curves, the confident stance, everything that made this machine look like nothing else on the road. Those rocker covers, as powerful as ever, as distinctive as ever, shone again. Day after day, the bench that was once covered in disassembled, corroded components slowly emptied, and piece by piece, the Knucklehead came back. There was nothing to rush here, no deadline that mattered more than doing this correctly. There was no shortcut worth taking on a machine like this. Every hour spent was an act of respect for what this motorcycle represents. Respect for that revolution of 1936. Respect for that record at Daytona. Respect for the generation returning from war and searching for freedom. Respect for the hands that built this in Milwaukee in 1947. This engine was going to breathe again. The moment finally came. We ran through the final checks one last time, not because we doubted the work, but because this machine deserved that level of care, that level of attention. Verified every line, every connection, every fitting, made sure everything that needed to be right was right. Then we kicked it. Once, a click. Twice, a shudder. A feeling of something waking up deep inside. Something stirring after a very long sleep. 3 times, the engine fired. That deep, heavy, unmistakable 1200cc Knucklehead voice broke decades of silence. Smoke curled from the exhaust. The engine shook. The whole machine trembled for a moment, then found its rhythm, settled into itself, and held its idle. Steady, strong, alive. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. The 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL was alive again. Not restored to sit in a museum, not rebuilt to stand behind glass at a show, not preserved as a relic for people to photograph and walk past. Restored to exist, to ride, to feel the wind, to feel the freedom that those war veterans felt when they climbed onto this motorcycle in 1947. When the war was over and the road stretched out ahead of them and there was nowhere to be but forward. Someone had left this machine behind, one of the final year knuckleheads ever built, left in a junkyard like it meant nothing, but it meant everything. It still does. Because this is not just a motorcycle. This is 11 years of engineering miracle stretching from 1936 to 1947. A legend that lived on American roads, on Daytona Beach, in the hearts of a generation returning from war. Built by hand, by people who believed that ordinary was never enough. We believe that too. Every day, every machine, every quiet hour in the workshop, every part cleaned and measured and placed with care. That is why we do this, for machines like this one, for moments like this one. For the moment an engine that hasn't run in decades coughs, shudders, and fires for the first time. The 1947 Harley-Davidson Knucklehead FL. After all these years of silence, it was ready to ride again.